Ram Ram, Namaste, Sitaram, Jai Shri Ram, Walaikum Salam, and Bula to all the Fiji Indians living in Fiji and those Fiji Indians living abroad. So today I am going to cover some aspects of the upcoming Girmit Remembrance Day for Fiji Indians. And I've been reading the press and some of the news articles that have been coming forth this week. And I was watching the 3-day program outline for the 3-day Remembrance Day at Lambasa, or in Lambasa. And I saw the chief guest being the President Ratu Nengama Lalambalavu. And the 3-day event is actually openly communicated as a 3-day 146 Girmit celebration. The term celebration is completely wrong. The Girmitians suffered a lot, and no one talks about it. The Girmitians who came in Leonidas were quarantined on a very small island called Yenuda Lailai, near Motoriki, or south of Overlau. They were then taken to Rambi Island, Gila Tavuni, etc., and lived under very harsh conditions. So I hope that whoever is going to write the speech for Ratu Nengama Lalambalavu write something very comprehensive, actually detailing the harsh conditions, the lives, the Girmitians who were shot dead on Rambi Island and Tavuni and Mango Island, how they were exploited, how and when Rambi Island was sold by Liva brothers, now called Unilever, and how the Girmitians were then kicked out of Rambi Island to settle in Natewa Bay, on Tavuni, and other parts of Vanuatu. The Girmitians were shot dead near Gila Tavuni, and where their bodies were dumped. And I hope that is covered. How there are still some generations of Captain John Hill living on Tavuni, or the land owned by the descendants of Captain John Hill on Tavuni. The Superintendent, Mr. Pacey Lyons, whose descendants, I think, still live on Tavuni, or they own a lot of freehold on Tavuni. And that should be what should be written in his speech. The real hardship and the lives of the Girmitians who came to Fiji, and how they worked on copra plantations in Natewa Bay, on the estate of Waimotu and Nadalose, in the village around Loa. And also, whoever writes the speech for the president writes how the first Girmitians were taken to Wainunu Bay in Vanuatu, and how they planted so many acres of land with coconut palms. There was a very large cotton plantation on David Whip Estate. There was a 250 to 300 acre tea plantation owned by Captain Robbie. And tea leaves were exported to Australia and New Zealand. So I hope that is covered in detail. And I also read today morning that the Minister of State for External Affairs is visiting Fiji and going to Vanuatu for the 3-day event. I don't know what going to Lambasa for 3 days is going to achieve. The Minister of State for External Affairs, who is traveling from India with an entourage, he should visit Rambi Island, where the first Girmitians were taken to work on copra plantation, the island owned by Captain John Hill. He should go and visit that island. How difficult it would have been to go and live on Rambi Island. He should also be taken for a visit to Gila Tavyuni near Somosomo. He should also be taken for a ride where the 2 sugar mills existed, where the Girmitians worked, and how many died. He should also be flown to Mango Island, which is owned by film actor Mel Gibson, and how the Girmitians worked to plant mangoes, cinnamon trees, copra, sugar plantation, and made it one of the richest islands in Fiji. He should visit there. He should also be taken for a visit to Yenuda Lailai, where 500 Girmitians lived in quarantine in 30 large bure houses, where there is no fresh water. Instead of going to Vanua Levu, Lambasa and staying in 5-star resorts and hotels and then go back. This is actually a mockery. And the Indian government and the Indian High Commission are spending money for nothing. There is also an entourage by Mr. Rakesh Upadhyay and his troupe of performing or singing some songs and items in Bhojpuri. This is the same person who I was in contact 5 years ago and promised that he was going to air and broadcast some of the programs which I was sending and presentations to him in Uttar Pradesh in India in Gorakhpur. He never did it. He's one of the biggest opportunists who has aligned himself with BJP and the Indian government and High Commission and travels around to certain countries during Girmitia week or Girmit week. The money could have been much wisely spent in building a monument on Yenuda Lailai and Rambi Island and Gila Tavyuni, on the foothills of Wainimbuka and Wainimala River, in Bila Levu Singatoka, and Doa Samu Tailevu, and Koronivia, near Nasuri. Instead of spending money on these people who will have no resemblance. And even if Mr. Rakesh Upadhyay and his entourage are going to be in Vanua Levu, I strongly recommend and suggest that his entourage be taken to Waninu Bay, to Mr. David Whippy's plantation, to Captain Roby's plantation, to Kadiwanga Copra plantation, so that he and his entourage and the Minister of State for External Affairs can go and actually witness under what conditions those Girmitians would have lived when they were taken there from 1880 to about 1890 and beyond. Instead of traveling around thinking that that's what Fiji is or was. And if they have time, then they should be taken to Natewa Bay for a ride and taken to where the Waimotu Copra estate still is, and Nadasole, and Loa village where the remains of some of the houses are still there, where the Indians were then kicked out in 1960. And they were harvesting close to 1,000 tons of rice paddy. They should go there. Then they will realize what the Girmitians went through. So I will end my presentation today. And please share this with as many friends and relations as possible. This is just a mockery of the Girmit Day Remembrance Day by calling it celebration. And I don't think so in those 3-day event will anyone mention where the first Girmitians landed in Vanua Levu, what difficulties they went through, someone doing a power presentation or a live presentation of how some of the Girmitians escaped from Wainunu Bay to Narawai Pass Nambawalu on a raft. And how difficult it was for the Girmitians to live on those 3 plantations, and how difficult it was for the Indians to live on Waimotu copra plantation and another Sole copra plantation because there was no road access. Goods were taken by small boats or schooners via Savu Savu while traveling towards Rambi Island and then cutting back into Natewa Bay. Supplies were taken once in 2 months or once in 3 months. There was no schools. There were no hospitals. That's how the Girmitians lived. Instead of all these, trying to cover things on the Fede Free that, the Indian government sent an entourage and a minister to participate in Girmit Day event, when you are not even going to go to any of those places where the first Girmitians were taken to when they came on Leonidas. So that's where I'll end my presentation. This is Pravind Kumar, born and raised in Ba, Fiji, living in Australia for the last 85 years. Dhanavad.